So we can put this down. So how's everybody doing? You managing? Nearly there.
Super enthusiastic about your presentation.
Yeah, excellent. That's the answer I wanted. So I don't know about you, but my mum had a pressure cooker, and it used to absolutely terrify me.
My mum did as well.
When she let off the steam at the end, I was like, oh. So anyway, but we're not quite at the letting off steam moment, I don't think. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know if you know how pressure cookers work, but you have to put weights on them to build up the steam. So I'm still adding another weight. So what I want to do just now is to talk through just some very basic ideas that I'm thinking about in relation to the test project and the data that we've collected. So it's a move away from theory, and it's very grounded empirical data, qualitative data that we've been looking at, and what we're doing to make sense of and trying to understand the results of the interviews that we've done. So I think we're all kind of agreeing that there is this movement around sustainability transitions, whatever we like to call it. There is an increase in these kind of initiatives and ideas. And although there's a huge amount of variability in the types of activities that they're engaging in the organisational forms that they take, we're beginning to detect systematic patterns. You know, Richard used a nice phrase yesterday, that we can find sort of order in the chaos. And one of the things that characterises a lot of these initiatives is that they're all engaging in what Pete North has called prefigurative practices, so that they are doing things in practice. So we can find kind of patterns within with this wide variety of initiatives. And another pattern that we can detect is that they're offering up what can be termed a positive response model, which organises around several key themes. This is particularly apparent in the transition movement, capital T, but it can also be found, and the narrative has also spread into other kinds of movements that might not necessarily label themselves transition. And these two ideas are relocalisation, so the idea of localising production, transport, energy to a smaller geographical scale. And one of the other ideas is around energy descent and reducing our energy usage and reducing our carbon footprint. So these two kind of key ideas keep recurring when you go to different groups. But as well as these prefigurative practices, there are also a lot of other ways to respond to climate change that these transition initiatives don't necessarily endorse or engage in. So we can think about direct action, we could think about protest, things like that. What, already? So we can think about... Yeah. Alongside this, there are also a number of other actions that people can take. No, she just said 5 minutes.
I'm having the alarm, so I'm measuring precise the 5 minutes.
Okay. Right. Okay. So what I want to think about is, can local action really challenge large-scale systemic change? And if it can, how can we think through this? And one of the other things about local action is that it's often described as being apolitical because of the kind of consensus model that transition groups often put forward and the emphasis they place on partnership working. We have to ask, what's happened to politics? What's happened to confrontation? How does local action challenge large-scale political power? How does it challenge big business? And entrenched power structures. So the change that these groups are imagining is not only environmental, it's a more holistic version of change. So often they're looking at societal change, where I think it was alluded to in the about the eco-villages, creating a new style, a new way of living. So we need to look more, at this holistic way of life. Again, we've mentioned across a wide range of activities, often bottom up, but groups also have to engage with government, with funding schemes, with local authorities, with wider governance structures. But the groups themselves often say there is no need to engage conflictually with wider power structures. We can do this consensually. I'm calling this into question and saying, but doesn't that often mean that the groups can be co-opted alongside existing structures rather than actually challenging and changing these structures? And I think there's really important questions that need to be asked around how local groups can engage with local authorities. The policy environment, some see it as very supportive of local groups. We can be a little bit more cynical and we can say, are government and local authorities actually pushing a neoliberal agenda? Are they getting communities to take local action for free so that the government doesn't need to do it, that government needs to change? Is it a form of greenwash? So although transition has much to commend it, and I wouldn't want to take away from it, I think there are serious questions to be asked around scaling up or replicating. How does a local agenda move up to a wider regional scale? How does it take account of changes in everyday practices? There are serious questions around political engagement and how we cope with different options of what's available or different visions, or when internally groups struggle and have competing visions about what needs to be done. But probably one of the most important, right, I'll take my 30 seconds as everybody else seems to. If transition initiatives are going to be successful, so let's imagine for a moment we do live in a world where people live in local, resilient, low-carbon communities. I think we need to think about what a transnational approach might look like. So what happens to the successful communities that do successfully transition against those that aren't able to transition or don't want to transition? So I think there are serious questions if we look at a global scale about equality and justice that are not necessarily being addressed at the moment. And I can end there. I think I've covered everything.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. One question. If we look at initiatives, then we often find that the people involved are not. Initiatives are not a one-off. They not happen from scratch and then start and end neatly like we would like them to do for analysis. It's more often that people engage in one initiative and then they go to the next and they have a next idea. Do you have an idea how we could profit or actually do such serial analysis? Would that change our picture of initiatives? If you have a perception of initiatives as one following another, for example, because the same agents are involved in the region, would that change our perception of initiatives?
I'm not sure that I understand what
I
you're...
think what I understand is that you asked for for a more intricate picture of what initiatives really are and how they work and what they can do. Sorry, then I got you wrong. And one thing I took from your speeches was that you referred to the relationship between initiatives and government.
Yes.
And that it's more complicated than we sometimes assume.
Yes.
And And if you take a different look at initiatives as not something that just happens as a one-off, but that's really part of the context that happens with people that are entrepreneurs, that are already experienced, that are also involved in different ways. My suggestion is that this would change the perception of initiatives per se, and maybe also yield a very different, probably much less romanticized picture of what we have as initiatives, especially in regional contexts. But I wonder how such a less naive and, well, if naive is the right word, but maybe less romanticized analysis and picture of such initiatives could look like. So what would we have to do to arrive at an improved picture?
Yeah, I have to say I'm also.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't.
Okay, it's okay. Just think of it again.
Sorry, we'll have to chat later. I don't follow your question at all.
Let's go on, Seth.
Right, I'll just carry on. No, I'm thinking, I feel pressured not to be confusing. I've gone blank all of a sudden. Right, what was I thinking? I'm thinking about this idea of conflict. You're talking here about initiatives, and you mentioned in the middle there something about you implied something about the radicalness of the vision of some of these initiatives. That sometimes there was a bit of variability in how radical some of these initiatives were thinking about in terms of transformations in society as a whole, rather than just within the initiatives. And I was just wondering how much thought on societal transformations actually does occur within initiatives. Are they simply looking for to be kind of given space and tolerated, or are they actually looking for societal transformations? I was just wondering how much explicit thought is given to the logic of societal transformation, because there can be negatives and positives associated with that also.
So across the 6 case studies in TESS, there is a very wide variation, and I didn't include that just now because obviously there wasn't enough time. But generally within the UK, and the ones that I'm more familiar with, they're very much see it as a form of local development and very willing to work with local authorities, and I would say they want to fit into the existing local authority regimes and not upset the apple cart, and be very working in partnership with local authorities. In other regions, we found that initiatives are very anarchistic and do not want to have anything to do with any form of authority or government, and are very oppositional. Don't even sometimes want to use money in a stand against society, capitalism. And there are all shades in between.
Is that to do with the selection criteria that you used, or is it something about? No,
I personally have an idea that it might be to do with the history, maybe this is where your question comes in, of the way the social movement, if you like, and the culture has developed in that region. So what we found in Barcelona, which has a strong history of oppositional politics, until they had an opposition politician elected as mayor, so I don't know how that'll play out. But they were the ones that were most anarchistic and would squat, and urban ones. But in the UK, it's much more, comes from a background that is much more willing to bring about change slowly within existing systems. But that's one of the things. We haven't done the analysis, yes. This is just our very kind of preliminary ideas to start thinking it through. Yeah.
There are 2 questions, and I would ask that you reply to them together.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a
Take
couple
them
of
both
reflections rather than questions. So, talking about this transition towns movement in the UK, as an example, I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that it's kind of explicitly set up in Rob Hopkins' original framing as a kind of apolitical movement. So. Yeah. The narrative they created, I mean, there was a specific narrative around the state kind of being inadequate and sort of withering away a little bit in the face of these massive converging crises, which kind of ignores the reality of what states actually do. But you have to kind of, we have to acknowledge the possibility of there being good reasons for them choosing to frame the movement in that apolitical way.
Yeah.
And that in some social and political contexts, at least, it can actually be a big advantage. And the second reflection is just that my personal experience as a participant in a transition town where I live is that quite a lot of the people who are active members in the transition towns are then also active in the Green Party. So they do that kind of political activism through the Green Party on a, Thursday night, and then they take part in transition towns as an activist in a more apolitical way on a Tuesday and Wednesday, and then that then creates a tension sometimes about whether a specific local transition towns initiative kind of gets taken over by the Green Party squad or not, or whether there's space in there for Conservative voters and Labour voters as well. And just anecdotally, from talking to people involved in other transition towns initiatives, you get different colourings of that in each different initiative.
Yeah.
One more question, Marcus.
Sometimes it's good to be the last, so can I refer to more of the speakers? First, I would back up what Liz said as response to Tony's question. We found the same, I think, in arts, from those who starting to really would like to change society and those who have no stake in that at all. And they changed over time. Sometimes people started to do that, were fed up after 10 years and say, okay, now I do only my own stuff. So the changes already. We found it the same things. I have the feeling that I understood what Holger meant with his question, and my answer would be, I have no answer if that changes our perspective on initiatives, but we found the situation that our single agents are involved in more initiatives should make us aware that it's still a fragile thing we have there. So we have the feeling if like 10 actors in Dresden would disappear for some reason, a lot more than 10 initiatives would go down. So I think that is really, we have to keep in mind. That's our feeling and some empirical results. And finally, that's why I was raising my hand, is how they engage with governance structures. I think what we found in the arts project is something which others found before us as well, especially Adrian Smith, who talked about stretch and transform and fit and conform. I think we have the same thing still there as strategies, and that creates tensions for local initiatives. We have one example from Dresden, starting with a really radical carrot from the urban gardening, and then they just discovered, okay, we cannot connect to governance structures with that picture, nobody takes it serious, and then they changed. So that was starting with stretch and transform, and then became fit and conform. And now once they enter, I wonder if they again try to stretch and transform. So I think it's navigating between strategies, doing both things. That's what we found.
Yeah.
Basically comments more than questions.
Yeah. I hadn't actually thought of that, but I suppose an initiative could go through cycles, and it could reform, and it could change its as members change or come and go, or it expands. Yes, its relationship with external power could change, or its policy towards a particular group, could change. Mm-hmm.